You know, we might get out of here by 7:35. I didn't hear one amen. Did you guys lip it because I was looking down?
We don't believe you.
Oh, you said liar.
Someone said set a timer.
Set a timer. I bet I could beat the timer. If you said it, I'll beat it.
Just don't put your wife's teeth in.
Don't put my... Oh. All right, Hebrews chapter 8. We're going to look at the first 5 verses. Now, the first 5 verses are basically a review of the last 8 chapters. And then starting in verse number 6, we hit a whole new section. And so I didn't want to finish, try to do the whole chapter and be here until tomorrow. So we're going to look at this review of the last 8 chapters in these 5 verses. Hebrews chapter 8, we'll start in verse number 1. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. You guys catch that? There's too much for me to say, so let me sum up. We have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. We have such a high priest. Of course, we just celebrated Resurrection Day. Usually around this time of the year, I watch The Passion of the Christ. It's a real Catholic movie. If you don't watch it, that's fine. They did an excellent job with the scribes and the Pharisees and the high priest. Thank God our high priest is not like those guys. Thank God that our high priest is accessible. If we go back into the Gospels, you guys remember when the Pharisee and then the publican prayed? Do you remember that? The Pharisee, when he prayed thus with himself. I thank God I'm not like you. Isn't that basically what he said? Yeah. Aren't you glad Jesus Christ, although he is not like us, he doesn't act like that towards us? You know, we have a high priest and we're going to see this in just a moment, he's sitting on the right hand of the throne of God and he's making intercession for us. He cares about us. He is one who is ready to forgive, 1 John 1:9. He's ready to forgive. He is ready to intercede. He is ready to heal. He's ready to help. And it's not like we have to go to him and bribe him or coerce him or beg him like those guys in the Old Testament. So when it says here we have such an high priest, you ought to underline the word such. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Where is he? You know, that's the other thing here. We have a high priest, but where is he? And of course, we know from other lessons and other scriptures that he's the creator. He is God. He's not a God, he's the God. And he's sitting on the throne, isn't he? So all this stuff that's going on, do you think the king knows about it? Do you think our high priest knows about it? What can he see from his throne? Everything. But how about if I go into my room, close my door, turn off the light, sit in my closet with the light off and the door closed? He can't see me in there. from his throne. Can he? Boy, aren't we a bunch of self-deceived people? We don't even go into a dark room, do we? We just go home and say, I'm in my home. I can do whatever I want. Nobody's going to know. Certainly, pastor's not going to know. And you might fool me for a while. You know who's watching you, though? Let me tell you what God does. And this really happened. And it just makes me smile every time because it didn't hurt me at all. One night we went to the Safeway that's over on Golf Links in Wilmot. And I was standing, and I think it was evening. It was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And I was standing in line to that little Starbucks kiosk that they have in there. And I was going to order me a coffee. Well, here comes walking across from the checkout lanes one of my church members, carrying a bottle of whiskey. And it's interesting all the gyrations that a church member will go through if he's doing something wrong and he sees his pastor. The thing turned around like this, and then he started kind of walking like this. But two things wrong with that scenario. I saw everything. And he knew that I saw everything. And so he just came up to me. Hey, Pastor, how you doing? By the way, this isn't for me. It's a gift. I'm like, yeah, okay. Okay. You know why I mention that? Because sometimes we think we're going to get away with it, don't we? And the Lord just has your pastor walk by you at the most inopportune time. Isn't it? Doesn't he? One day I'm going to walk into Home Depot and I'm going to hear Tiffany just cussing up a storm at a customer. And add another church member. But I'm saying all of that to say this. Where is he? Our great high priest, such a high priest is sitting on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. A place of importance, isn't it? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? You know, Ron Hamilton wrote that song. Worthy is the Lamb. You're in Hebrews chapter 8. Go back to Hebrews chapter 1. Let's take a look at verse number 3. We'll see the same thing again. Hebrews chapter 1, verse number 3. I just had to get past the 5-minute mark. Now we'll be done here in a couple of minutes. Hebrews 1:3. Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. Again, after he did all of his work, what did he do? He sat down. That kind of puts an exclamation point on the phrase, it is finished. He sat down. All right, back in Hebrews chapter number 8. So, such a high priest who sat down on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. Verse number 2, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched, and not man. Who designed the tabernacle? David did, didn't he? Yeah, David. Well, look. Did I put those verses in here? No. I didn't put the David reference in here. I did put Moses' reference in here. Moses designed it, didn't he? We're going to look at that in verse number 5, so I'm going to kind of hold off on verse number 2 till we get down to verse number 5 in just a moment. But what did the minister of the sanctuary do? He's the one that walked into the Holy of Holies and offered the blood of atonement on the mercy seat. All right, verse 3, for every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices, whereof it is of necessity that this man have somewhat also to offer. What did he offer? So the Old Testament priest, which is what we're talking about here in the beginning, for every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. What did they offer? Well, the blood of sheep and goats, right, of the Old Testament, and turtle doves, and what else did they offer? Pigeons, doves, bulls, bullocks. Incense. This man refers back to that high priest, such a high priest, have somewhat also to offer. What did he offer? Have we already seen that he's offered himself once for all? There's a verse somewhere in the Bible, by one man sin entered into the world, and then by one man sin was purged. Titus chapter 2, verses 13 and 14, looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people zealous of good works. So what did he offer? Himself. What did he get for that offering? Were they redeemed in the Old Testament? Were their sins forgiven in the Old Testament? Just covered. Were they washed away? Were they moved from black to white? So what he offered was what we needed. Verse number 4, for if he were on earth, he should not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law. This is a reference to him being of the order of Melchizedek. Could Jesus, born of the tribe of Judah, be a priest? We just looked at this a couple weeks ago. What tribe did you have to be born of to be a priest? The tribe of Levi. What tribe did you have to be born of to be a king? All right, what one did you have to be born of to be a king priest? Melchizedek is the right answer. Now, Melchizedek didn't have a tribe. It was he, himself, and himself. He, himself, and him? Does that work? What happens if a king tried to do the office of a priest? Do you guys remember the example that I gave you?
Saul?
Not Saul. I mean, Saul was one. Uzziah. Yes. Probably ought to not. So, you've heard stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. You're the king, stay in your lane. Okay? You're the priest, stay in your lane. The only one that can jump lanes is Melchizedek and those of the order of Melchizedek. And of everybody on planet Earth, how many people does that include? That's where I'm at. 1. I believe, and I've told you this before, I believe that Melchizedek was an Old Testament pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. We just saw Melchizedek's genealogy, didn't we? Had no beginning, no ending, no mother, no father. Who does that sound like? The Eternal One. Verse number 5. Who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. Now, could Moses just make the tabernacle any way that he wanted? I don't feel like putting a room inside of a room. You know, we got this whole desert thing going on here, and what I want to do is have open spaces. Right? And by the way, badger skins are heavy, veils are heavy, materials heavy. We're just going to make it out of something lighter. Veil. I mean, it'd be like cheesecloth. Well, it's a little more sturdy than that. A little more sturdy than that. Yeah, well, you know, Egypt was right there. Don't you guys have Egyptian sheets? Egyptian cotton. There we go. So, Lord, we're just going to use Egypt. Could Moses go and say that? Were there reasons for the layers on the roof? At least one, right? At least one, right? Though your sin be scarlet, they shall be white as snow. What's one of the layers of the ceiling or the roof covering of the tabernacle? Badger skins dyed red. If you look at red through red, what do you see? White. It's cool. You guys ought to do an experiment. I did this once in church service years and years and years ago. I found a red light bulb, and I found some red fabric. And I turned off all the lights in the church, and I turned on that little red light bulb, and I held up the red fabric. You know what color it was? It was gleaming white. It was like gleaming white. And the closer to the red that you get of the light and the material, the color of the material, the brighter it gets. It's a real cool exercise or illustration. And so when God looks at scarlet sin in the Holy of Holies through the tabernacle roof, he's looking at red through red. Though your sin be scarlet, it shall be white as snow. Does Moses know things like that? Moses probably never had a red light bulb. I'm just saying. Didn't have God's viewpoint either. But I'm just saying, he probably didn't have a red light bulb. So he had to make it by the pattern. By the way, where do you think God had that pattern? Do you think there may have been a tabernacle already up in heaven, waiting for the sacrifice to come and to present his blood in the Holy of Holies in heaven? And do you think that the earthly tabernacle was patterned after the heavenly tabernacle? I want to say yes. I want to say the pattern that God was giving Moses, God was just, if he was a man, he had a place. He was probably sitting there looking at the heavenly pattern or the heavenly tabernacle, and he's saying, I want the room to be so many cubits by so many cubits by so many cubits. And I want you to put so many boards this way. And then I want you to put so many, by the way, gold, Everything was gold plated. And I want you to set the supports in brass sockets. You know why brass? No. No. The earth was cursed, was it not? Didn't God curse the earth? Brass is a symbol of judgment. So everything that was brass that was placed in the ground, by the way, that's the only place that brass things were placed, were in the ground, showed that the judgment was there. And then he placed the holy things on top of that. Then he placed the gold-plated wood and all of the furniture on top of that, and the curtains, the purple curtains, the angels, the cherubim that were all on the inside there. And then we get to the veil. It had to have been that thick. You know how heavy that thing was? And then the priests couldn't see the Holy of Holies. They could never look at the Holy of Holies. So when it was time to break down the tabernacle, they had to grab the veil poles and back up and cover the Ark of the Covenant. All after the pattern. All after the pattern. God wasn't just spouting some things just because that's what he wanted. I believe he was sitting there looking at the tabernacle that was in heaven and giving us an earthly one. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 30, thou shalt rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion thereof, which was showed thee in the mount. In Acts chapter 7 and verse 44, our fathers had the tabernacle of witness in the wilderness, as he had appointed, speaking unto Moses, that he should make it according to the fashion that he had seen. Moses couldn't go and just do whatever he wanted. There was a pattern that Moses needed to follow on this tabernacle. Why would that be so important? Who was in charge, God or Moses? Who did the people think was in charge? They thought it was Moses, didn't they? Moses, why are you doing all this stuff to us? Right? Were there not enough graves? I always go back to that. Were there not enough graves in Egypt that you had to bring us out into the wilderness to kill us here? Well, we'll just throw you in the desert. Just leave you. So again, these first 5 verses are just a review of the first 8 chapters that we saw. We saw that we have a high priest that is in the right hand of the Majesty on high. There's a tabernacle. We saw about high priests. We also saw the order of Melchizedek, that he is not from the same tribe as the priests and does not offer the same sacrifice as the priests. And then we're talking about the tabernacle one more time and the ministry thereof and the pattern of it. So let's bring it to today. Who's sitting on the throne? Do you think there's a pattern? What do you think? Do you think God's working by a plan, or is he just shooting from the hip? Things are happening in the world, and he's like, oh no, I didn't see that one coming. Let's do this now. Yeah. Anybody believe that? Or do you think everything's going according to plan? That's what I believe. As bad as it's getting, as bad as it has gotten, and it is getting worse, and it's going to get worse. Nothing is taken him by plan. Where's he sitting? He's on the throne. A lot of times we use that as cliche, don't we? Well, you know who's sitting on the throne. But sometimes we forget who it is that is sitting on the throne. And he's got a pattern. He's got a plan. And a lot of times we forget that too. And he's going to work his plan. And so what I see in these 5 verses, that's what I see in these 5 verses here. We have a high priest. He's sitting on the throne. He's still on the throne, and there's a plan. There's not anything that's going to take him by surprise. Did he not say in his word that it's going to wax worse and worse? What's it doing? Wax on, wax on, wax on. It's waxing worse and worse, is it not? All right, questions, comments?